to the Gun Collective podcast. My name is Jon Patton. Boys and girls, I know. I say it every time, but I have yet another amazing guest this week. I don't know how I keep getting so many amazing guests, but yes, it is true. However, before we get to that, I got to shout out the sponsors. We've got Vertex, VERTX.com, and use that code TGC and get yourself a bag, some apparel, some organization for your vehicle. I use the Ready Pack 2.0 all the time, every day, and I absolutely love it. Not only that, but you can store a gun inside there. It's got spots for armor in it as well. The website is VERTX.com. Use the code TGC, and the same code TGC is available at Camorado. It's CAMORADO.com. And get yourself some of our brand new TGC Sea Smoke signature camo pattern. Camorado is run by our good friend Sean Heron at We Like Shooting, and it is one of my favorite camo patterns, let alone all the different colors you can get. You can get shirts, hoodies, pants, shorts, you name it. Camorado.com. Use the code TGC. Okay, today, my guest is somebody that I think is one of the more important people to be talking to in the United States right now. Bar none. Sure, everybody wants to talk about Trump. This young man is doing some really important work. I've got the Attorney General of Missouri, Andrew Bailey, with me. How are you, man?
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me on.
I'm so pumped that you're here. We have so much to talk about, and there's never enough time. How are you? Have you gotten any sleep recently? You're so busy. Like, what's going on in your world, man?
Well, if you believe the left-wing media, I sleep hanging upside down. So, it's all good, man. It's all good. No, it's been great. Went through the last year running in a primary, won the primary, and we're poised for a general election in November, and looking forward to leading the Missouri Attorney General's office for the next 4 years and beyond. We got a lot of work to do, man. It's a scary time in our nation's history. The values that we hold dear, the legacy of freedom we've inherited from our ancestors that they fought and died for, man, those things are under attack. And if we don't have warriors that with good common practical sense that are willing to fight back, we will lose those things. And so I'm proud to be standing in the gap now and hope to be doing so in the future.
You know, it almost sounds fake when I hear people say that. It almost sounds fake. It's like, wait, that's what we all believe. That's what all of us like-minded individuals actually believe. And here is somebody in a role with some actual power saying the exact same things. What's your background? Like, where the hell did you come from, man?
Hey, I grew up here in Missouri, hometown kid, went into the Army on an Army ROTC scholarship at the University of Missouri in 1999. Okay. Planned on going to law school. 9/11 happened. Plans changed. Volunteered for a combat arms branch of service, was trained on tanks, was assigned as an armored cavalry scout platoon leader, deployed to Iraq, did 2 deployments to Iraq, came home, and after leading soldiers in Iraq for 2 deployments, and came home, went back to Mizzou on the post 9/11 GI Bill. And all I ever wanted to do was be a prosecuting attorney at the state level. Was an assistant prosecutor in Warren County, Missouri. Married a gal from Texas that I met when I was stationed down there in the Army, and we ended up adopting kiddos. And so I couldn't afford to be an assistant prosecutor in a third-class county anymore. So I went to work at the Missouri Department of Corrections on the same day that our governor took office on June 1st, 2018, after our previous governor resigned. And the Governor Parson, when he took over in June of 2018, saw me working at Department of Corrections and pulled me up to be on his staff. So I just happened to be at the right place at the right time when Eric Schmitt, my predecessor as Attorney General, when he was elected to the United States Senate. And Governor Parson appointed me to fill out the remainder of Eric Schmitt's term, which I've done, and am now running for a term in my own right. And again, we just won a contested primary, looking forward to winning a contested general election against a Democrat.
So I understand it that the primary had some very interesting results, right?
Yeah, look, it's cool to win every county in the state, all 114 counties plus the city of St. Louis.
That's unbelievable, dude.
Well,
unbelievable.
And look, yeah, it's really cool. And we won all but 2 of them by double digits. And to have hundreds of thousands of people across the state of Missouri, many of whom I've never met, be willing to go to the polling place and cast a ballot for me, it's humbling, man. It is truly humbling, and it's not something I take lightly or take for granted.
I think it's fantastic, and I think our audience is going to agree with me once we start to sort of peel back the onion of the totality of the fight that you're putting up against bullshit in this country. Because I honestly think it's wonderful. So the first thing I want to dive into is the Second Amendment Preservation. That's what it's called, right? Second Amendment Preservation Act.
Yeah, SAPA, Second Amendment Preservation Act.
Can you expand on how, like, what's your involvement with that? Bring me up to speed.
Yeah, so there was a pro-Second Amendment group in the state of Missouri who worked with our legislature, our General Assembly, to get a bill passed a few years back, and Governor Parsons signed that bill into law. And it's the strongest protection for both the Second Amendment and the 10th Amendment that I'm aware of in any state statute across the nation. We all know what the Second Amendment stands for, but people often forget the 10th Amendment. And it stands for the proposition that any authority not given to the federal government or denied to the states is enjoyed by the states and the people of the states. Ooh. And the Supreme Court has interpreted the 10th Amendment to include what we call the anti-commandeering doctrine. And it stands for the proposition. Again, this is found in case law, United States Supreme Court jurisprudence interpreting the 10th Amendment. But it stands for the proposition that the federal government can't commandeer the apparatus of state government or bully the state into doing things that the federal government doesn't have the authority to do itself. So that the states have this broad residual power, whereas the federal government is a government of limited authority. And that's what was codified in the Second Amendment Preservation Act, that the state of Missouri was not going to allow federal officials to order state and local law enforcement officials to carry out unconstitutional gun restrictions, gun grabs, gun registrations. And as soon as the governor signed the law, the Department of Justice sued the state of Missouri. Biden's DOJ hates this law because they want to have control. They want to have control. Yeah, they want to have control over the states. They want to have control over you and I, what we think, what we say, what we own. And they obviously want to register and ultimately confiscate our guns. And I'm not going to let that happen. We've defended the lawsuit at the trial court level and most recently at the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals. A 3-judge panel of the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals disagreed with our legal argument, and so we will be appealing to the United States Supreme Court. I think this is a really critical question for the Supreme Court. Do the states still retain sovereignty from the federal government? Can the states exercise their inherent residual police powers under the 10th Amendment without being coerced and cajoled by federal officials? And does standing matter? Under the Second Amendment Preservation Act, it doesn't limit federal officials. So how can those federal officials demonstrate that they are harmed in any way, shape, or form?
I don't think they can. I genuinely, I don't know how they could, with a straight face, deny the states' rights in this instance. I think what's really going to be important here is that I'm not aware of any other challenge at this level to the Supreme Court about states' rights. As far as I'm aware, this is one of the biggest deals, and it happens to be about guns, right? Like it's kind of twofold. Yes, obviously preserve the Second Amendment, but, or I should say, and we also need to understand the Supreme Court's ruling on whether or not the states have the right to do this still. I mean, obviously, it's in the 10th Amendment. However, we've seen them bend on some certain things. What's the timeline on this actually happening? I know we're seeing stuff happening like right now, correct?
Yeah. The 8th Circuit Court of Appeals just handed down its opinion from, again, the 3-judge panel a few days ago. Okay. And so we're still, we've read it several times. We're still kind of analyzing it and its implications. There's a period before that judgment becomes final. And then there's a period where you can seek further appellate review at the Court of Appeals. And then you've got 100, 105 days, 115 days. You've got ample time to prepare a petition for writ of certiorari to the United States Supreme Court. And I think that this case is appropriate for the United States Supreme Court. We're hopeful they'll take it. Again, I think as you mentioned and as you've touched on, this is a really critical question as we see the Biden administration expand federal authority in ways that were unimaginable to the founding fathers and are inherently antithetical to our notions of ordered liberty and freedom. And so do states still retain any autonomy? And I
Right.
think that's an
Right.
important question that we're going to need the United States Supreme Court to answer. And does standing matter? I mean, everybody, talks about standing and kicking the states out for standing. Well, what about when the federal government doesn't have standing? Shouldn't that work both ways?
I think we've seen this sort of slow, well, more rapid now, but slow encroachment over my lifetime of the federal powers. And what's been more interesting in recent years is the abuse of executive orders. And it
Yeah.
seems like anything that the executive branch can't get done through regular means, consistent means, they often go, well, screw it, we'll do an executive order. We're just
Yeah.
going to take all the guns through executive order, and all of
Yeah.
us just kind of go, what? No,
Not how that
uh-uh.
works. Yeah. 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 Well, I think the separation of powers matters. I mean, our founding
Right.
fathers, and again, we're talking about a legacy of freedom and liberty that is handed down. And we talk about the separation of powers. The founding fathers contrived, timeless principles of freedom that are codified in the structure of the Constitution. Except they understood that, diffusing power for a limited federal authority, diffusing that power over three co-equal branches with different roles and responsibilities was critical. And you're right. I mean, it's like Congress doesn't get anything done. So the president just starts using executive orders, or what I think is even equally or more pernicious is President Biden's use of regulatory authority. He uses the alphabet soup of federal agencies. We all know ATF and DOJ and DEA, but, the Department of Labor, Department of Education, Department of Agriculture, EPA. I mean, the undersecretary of the EPA has enormous influence over our daily lives in ways that may not be immediately perceptible to us, but they can pass these rules that take our property and our right to use our property away. We've seen the ATF try to pass rules to ban pistol braces. It's completely unconstitutional. The executive branch of government does not have the authority to make rules and enforce those rules and adjudicate those rules. And certainly that's only Congress does. And when we talk about pistol braces, that also runs afoul of the Second Amendment, would violate our right to keep and bear arms. But, at the end of the day, fighting back against this rise of the administrative state and that army of unelected federal bureaucrats, that's really been the centerpiece of the work I've done over the past 18 months. And I think will be the focus of so much of what we do going forward.
So did you think when you kind of got into this role that you would spend a large majority of your time pissing off the the president?
I did never imagine that we would have a president that was so aloof or would so reject and ignore the rule of law and the plain text and original understanding and history and tradition of the United States Constitution. I've never thought we would have a president who was so against freedom. I mean, he doesn't want you to be able to speak what you want to say. He doesn't want you to be able to think what you want to think. He doesn't want you to be able to own what you want to own. He doesn't want you to be able to use your property the way you may want to use it. He wants you to work hard to give him money so he can give it to other people. He doesn't want to have to secure our southern border so that he can then flood this country with people that have no legal right to be here. And he's going to pervert the law to do it. Meanwhile, every community in the United States is suffering from fentanyl and human trafficking that's flooding into this country. I mean, it's like, I think about my grandparents, and if they were alive today, they wouldn't even recognize the country we live in. And it's a horror show. And if we don't have folks that are willing to fight back, we will continue to lose ground. We've got more than 50 lawsuits pending right now against the Biden administration. And I don't know what else to do. Like the Biden administration thinks they get to do whatever they want until someone tells them to stop. Okay, then we will go to court and make them stop.
So what happens, and this is my own ignorance of the law, what happens once that administration is out?
So
like if Harris wins, if Trump wins, whatever, like how does that work?
Yeah. Well, if Harris wins, I mean, we have every reason to believe that she will continue to pursue a radical, woke, progressive agenda that would include pushing the bounds of these federal executive agencies, these unelected federal bureaucrats, having them continue to pass and promulgate rules that interfere with our way of life and our freedom and violate, the plain text of the statutes that create those organizations and the doctrine of separation of powers in the Constitution. We have every reason to believe she will continue to do that. even if President Trump wins, our hope would be that the Trump administration, we believe that the Trump administration would work with us to get good case law in place to prevent this from ever happening again, to go ahead and create case precedent so that anyone that would come after President Trump, when we got another Biden or another Harris down the road, this soil would have already been tilled and we wouldn't have these problems. President Trump made America great again, and I have every reason to believe he will do that in a second term. And I'm excited about him bringing home a win in November and just restoring the rule of law and freedom and hope to this country and to voices like yours and mine and the people that we live and work with.
I was very skeptical. When you and I first met, we were at the GOA event at Goals, and we were in a room with all the content creators and all this sort of stuff, and we had a great time. And I'm always very skeptical of people that is sort of, oh, this guy's the new rock star, that sort of thing. And I'm always very skeptical, but it is really refreshing to hear you talking in like this very level-headed manner. You're not coming at it like the sky is falling. You're just like, we're not tolerating this crap anymore. And speaking of not tolerating shit, we have to talk about Face Space, my book, whatever the F we're calling it this week, Meta, these numbskulls in California. Yeah. Can you educate me on the efforts that you're making in terms of censorship? Because I have 100% been my business is every day affected by the censorship from big tech. And it seems like you are just, those old school drills where you kind of did this sort of thing and it just puts a little hole. I feel like you're doing that in the dam that they've built of protection.
Yeah. And let me say this, the First Amendment of the United States Constitution protects our right to speak and listeners' rights to hear. And in the past, the remedy for disfavored speech has always been counter speech, not government censorship, not censorship. And, the whole idea is that we have this free, fair, and open marketplace, a competition of ideas where the best ideas win. If we don't like what the other side is saying, we present a better argument. And traditionally, we have won those arguments. And so the left realized that. And so the left has begun using big tech social media, which is an oligarchy that controls the information flow in this country, to censor voices like yours and mine on big tech social media platforms. The government from 2020 on has demanded and coerced that censorship. And that was proven in my lawsuit, Missouri v. Biden, which we brought, that demonstrated that during COVID, the Biden administration threatened big tech social media with an antitrust lawsuit or with a repeal or amendment to Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which is their cash cow and has created this oligarchy. And if they didn't do what the Biden administration wanted, that the Biden administration would punish them. And so big tech started.
Hold on, we have to pause there. There. The executive branch, the Biden administration, basically said, do what we want or you'll lose all of this protection that you have.
Do what we demand or else. It was a coercive and collusive relationship from the very top levels of the White House.
That is effing dangerous.
It's crazy, man. It's George Orwell on his most creative day could not have contrived the vast censorship enterprise under which we now suffer. This is what the yoke of tyranny looks like. A tyranny of driving our ideas and our voices from public discourse. And it started with COVID, but it has expanded to other topics. And the censorship enterprise will continue to expand absent some check to put a stop to it. I think the case of Missouri v. Biden is an important first step. We went to the United States Supreme Court, and unfortunately, we had a preliminary injunction based on preliminary discovery that demonstrated the censorship enterprise. Okay. And the Supreme Court said, hey, look, there was coercion here. The government coerced censorship in violation of the First Amendment, but the states only have evidence that this was related to COVID in 2020, 2021. And so they sent us back down to the trial court level. And just yesterday, the district court judge said, okay, states, what discovery do you need to continue making your case as part of this lawsuit? So we're back at it, man. And we're going to use the rules of discovery, the federal rules of civil procedure and formal discovery process to root out and put a stop to that vast censorship enterprise.
So when we're talking about discovery, I have a mild understanding of it. I say I went to the Adam Kraut School of Law. Those that have watched will understand. Adam is now heading up the Second Amendment Foundation. Longtime friend of mine. I got to learn through him. But how does that discovery process work? What is that?
So
Go ahead.
the parties can make certain demands for documents, information, and depositions, both written and oral testimony. And so we're going to do that to again find out where the censorship enterprise still exists and where it's still functioning and operating. And I have every reason to believe it's still there for a couple of reasons. Number one, the evidence that we have, and again, this is after numerous depositions, 20,000 pages of documents, preliminary discovery to get the preliminary injunction. What we can demonstrate is that those censorship demands that the Biden administration was placing on big tech grew so rapidly. In other words, the volume of demands that they requested or demands they made for censorship grew so exponentially, so quickly that the federal government had to design a new bureaucratic system to manage the flow of censorship demands. So we know it grew quickly. And in our experience, when the federal government grows quickly and starts taking away freedoms, they don't regress. They don't retract on their own. They don't retreat on their own. Somebody has to make them stop. So It's going to be there. We flip on the light and the cockroaches are going to run. And that's what the discovery process is going to do for us.
So is it just, you said we, so it's obviously Missouri is fighting back. Are there any other state level attorneys that are fighting with you?
Yeah, absolutely. The state of Louisiana is a good partner on this lawsuit. It's Missouri and Louisiana are the two states. My colleague, Liz Merle, down in Louisiana is a great friend and colleague and partner in this lawsuit. And then there are private plaintiffs as well. There are physicians, doctors, scientists whose voices were silenced during the pandemic, who had information that would have been helpful for people to make individual healthcare decisions. And the federal government denied them the ability to do that. And your viewers, your listeners, your audience, and every other audience was denied the ability to hear from these medical professionals because it didn't fit Joe Biden's narrative. But make no mistake about it. This has never been about truth. It's always been about control and power for the Biden administration.
You know, I think back to what life was like here in Pennsylvania. I live in southeastern PA, about an hour outside of Philadelphia. And I sort of do the rewind and go, man, this was a different planet. The amount of fear that was struck into people's hearts over all of that stuff. And then the continuation of these ideologies afterwards and through COVID, that like we had this cultural upheaval almost, on both sides. People went, wait, I think I need a gun. We saw the largest rise in gun ownership. And at the same time, we saw massive censorship. You couldn't talk about anything. I mean, I've got a few good friends that had massive audiences just closed off, audiences where they have built for years, just shut down because of one, maybe two comments that were contrarian to what the powers that be would want us to say. And, I've also had conversations about what it was like in other parts of the country. And they're like, no, it was fine. Nobody was wearing a mask. Nobody was scared. Everybody was just walking around. And then I go, this country is run by people. And this is the same as like New York City running the entire state of New York. The cesspool that is Washington, D.C. and its surrounding areas is trying to impart these ridiculous ideas on all of the U.S. And I am so happy to see them getting pushed.
Yeah. Let me say a couple things there. Number one, the censorship that is going on today that you and I both experienced and your audience has experienced is different and worse than at any point in human history. And here's why. When King George shut down the printing press in England or in the colonies, the whole world knew he had done it because he had to do it in the light of day. And he was really only stifling or silencing the written word. Or when he imprisoned someone who was speaking from a platform, he was really only censoring the spoken word. But when big tech social media platforms at the government's demand or otherwise silence your and my voices and shows like this or your audience, It's first of all, it's done in shadows. It's clandestine. We don't always know that we've been deplatformed, de-emphasized, shadow banned, and so it's a more clandestine form of censorship because it's done without anyone knowing about it. But then also, it's more nefarious because it's multidimensional. It's the written word, it's the spoken word, it's verbal, it's nonverbal language, it's body language, it's images. And so it's more dangerous than any point in human history. And we've got to build a wall of separation between tech and state to protect us from government censorship and violation of the First Amendment. But I think we got to go further than that as well. And we've got to fight back against the big tech oligarchy who wants to silence our voices because they inherently disagree with the things we're talking about. Like we said, COVID was the Trojan horse that got the enemy behind the gate. But at the end of the day, what about when Mark Zuckerberg says that firearm ownership is a national health emergency, and thus he's going to limit our, that's going on now. We just don't. He hasn't publicly stated it, but gun owners and our ability to talk about the Second Amendment and our freedoms and firearm ownership and firearms in general, those topics are off limits in a lot of places on big tech, and so we've got to fight back against this oligarchy. I can't buy a product at the grocery store without seeing a warning label. And yet, as a consumer, I'm on this product called big tech, and I have no idea what the censorship algorithms are, and may not even know that I've been censored. So we've got, as state attorneys general, we've got to find ways, tools in our arsenal, tools in our toolkit to fight back against big tech censorship, corporate censorship, as well as government censorship.
Do you think that the massive censorship of firearm-related content and ideas, do you think that is intentional for a long-term control thing, or is it just like the very basic level, we don't like these because a couple evil people have shot up a school? Do you think it is this idea that gets floated around that they don't want us to be armed because they don't want us to fight back? Do you think it's that deep?
I think it is that deep. I think there are individuals operating in the big tech oligarchy who want to fundamentally reorder, alter, and change our culture and our way of life forever. And they're going to do that by controlling our access to information and controlling the information flow that comes from speakers like us and that is received by listeners like your audience. And if, again, there needs to be warning labels on that stuff. If you're going to fundamentally alter reality based on the information flow, before I purchase your good or service, I need to know that.
I think it's very interesting watching the sort of juxtaposition of Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg. Those are the two most prolific characters in that world. And watching Elon literally curse out people from the European Union while Zuckerberg is bowing to the president is kind of fascinating. Do you think X still has issues, or is that something that is generally going to be okay? Because I've heard there's a little bit of sort of not censorship, but disallowing certain advertisement and all that sort of thing. Are you still concerned about X as a whole?
I think X is one of the last platforms dedicated to free speech in America. They 100% perfect all the time. It's hard for any corporation to produce a product that's 100% perfect all the time. Sure. But I think that in a lot of ways, Elon Musk has presented kind of the best in class model, and I think there are others as well. But when you juxtapose Elon with Zuckerberg, I think there's some really stark contrast between trying to do it the right way and definitely dedicated to doing it the wrong way. But let me say this too. We go back to Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, and that's really the fount of the legal problems we're having.
What was it called one more time?
Yeah, it's Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. It was passed in the 1990s. Okay. And it has really led to the birth of the internet and has created this big tech oligarchy. And when you have power consolidated amongst a small group of people, those people are then more susceptible to government coerced censorship, and the normal open market principles that would protect people like you and me from censorship don't exist because the market's not functioning properly, because there's not true competition amongst the market competitors. Section 230 of the CDA is both a sword and a shield for the big tech social media companies. It's a shield in the sense that it shields them from civil liability as publishers under the common law. So in other words, the big tech social media, we can't sue. I can't sue Wikipedia for the things that are said about me on Wikipedia, even if those things are malicious and false and hurt my reputation. I can't sue them. But at the same time, Section 230 of the CDA empowers. There's a textual, explicit empowering of the big tech social media companies to censor. It says you can and should censor, and so that is what has empowered them. It should not be a sword. It should only be a shield. And I think the fact that they've been empowered to do this censorship has led to this oligarchy and has created this world in which, again, they're fundamentally realtering our culture through the control of information and dissemination of information that to only fit their ideology and their narrative that's antithetical to our beliefs, our way of life, and our Constitution.
I distinctly remember talking about the power that Facebook had. I don't remember the year. It was very early on in the Gun Collective's lifespan. When I first started, we were fortunate enough to grow a decent sized Facebook audience. And then it started to they started to crush our reach and started to crush the growth. And I started to go, wait a second, if they can just sort of wave this wand, imagine the control that they would have over an election.
Yep.
And thankfully, we've seen the curtain pulled back on that. Do you think that we have seen everything in terms of truth come out of the what is it, Meta? It used to be X. YouTube. Have we seen the end of this? Are they changing their ways? What's happening?
Yeah, but again, I think they are absolutely evolving, adapting, improvising, and finding new ways to control the information flow and drive our voices from public discourse. And again, it's not.
So they're still doing this wholeheartedly.
Oh,
you think?
Yeah, 100%, yeah. And we know that the government is still censoring speech, and we're gonna prove that in our case, Missouri v. Biden, which again we're at the district court level now, undergoing merits discovery. But I also think that there are corporate individuals within the big tech oligarchy that are turning the dials, that are silencing our voices and driving our voices from public discourse, de-emphasizing, deplatforming, shadow banning. And I think that at the end of the day, there are tools we have at the state level. You saw Texas and Florida pass statutes that essentially do what I'm advocating for, which is that if they're going to censor, they've got to at least warn consumers about how they're censoring. In the absence of that kind of in the absence of that kind of state statute, I think that state attorneys general can use consumer protection law and/or antitrust law to go after the corporate censorship that's occurring as well. And I think it's important that we do that.
So what are the repercussions for doing all of this? Because yes, we're suing them. Yes, we're fighting back. But the phrase I've been using is the motion to tar and feather it's not a thing. So what are the repercussions when we inevitably showcase the lunacy happening at the social media and regular media control places? Like, how does this go?
Well, there can be sanctions within the context of a lawsuit. Like, in other words, if this oligarchy, if these big tech social media companies represent a restraint on trade, a restraint on competition, they could potentially be violating antitrust laws and could be broken up through an antitrust proceeding to the extent they're harming consumers because of deceptive practices by misleading the public as to the information that they are going to allow or disallow. There can be sanctions under consumer protection law. But at the end of the day, I think you take all of the evidence you get in those lawsuits combined with the evidence we'll get in Missouri v. Biden, and you put it all in the public domain. And I think that Congress has a role to play here to amend Section 230 of the CDA to get rid of that sword provision. perhaps to appoint an inspector general to monitor compliance with a court order that we may end up getting in the case of Missouri v. Biden. And I also think that consumers, once we full well understand what's going on and who's turning the dials and how they're doing that and why they're doing that, does the market respond? And do enough of us consumers get together and say, we don't like these products anymore, we want a new product, and the market will adjust to that demand and will create supply to meet that demand. So once we get the market functioning properly, I think the issue resolves itself, but it's going to take, it's going to take us pushing forward through this process to get there.
I think it's going to be real effing interesting. Really, really interesting. I mean, again, I want them tar and feathered. I think the just disgrace that they've created is outlandish. When I think of how wonderful my business would be, and I can only speak for myself, the sort of opportunities that I've missed from being sort of the redheaded stepchild, being a gun owner, being a gun media outlet. I think of, wow, how amazing would it be if I was able to talk about guns like people are able to talk about cars or makeup or all these other things that are very popular on YouTube and social media in general. And I often wonder what the world would be like. Imagine the amount of new gun owners that would be educated, just educated, not like, maybe they don't buy a gun, but maybe they have the opportunity to be educated on something that we all know is a wonderful thing. The shooting sports is amazing. Being able to protect yourself is amazing. And being able to defend against tyranny is the way this should go. But we don't even we have a whole section of the community of our populace that has no exposure to this. What do you think the world, like, what do you think about all that?
Yeah, again, that's antithetical to who we are as a free people and as an American people protected by the First Amendment. It's a free, fair, and open competition of ideas. But if our voices are silenced, if our listeners can't hear from us, our ideas can't compete. The left has rigged the game to drive our voices from public discourse because they can't win the argument. If we're just allowed the opportunity to educate, to explain, to articulate, to have the conversation, we will prevail. We will overcome. And I think that's what scares the other side. They've got to rig the system to silence us. And that's why we got to fight back. But yeah, I mean, we live in a much better world with more speech, not with less speech.
And more guns.
And more guns. Absolutely. That's the best bulwark against a tyrannical government. And I would say that, the founding fathers didn't enshrine our right to keep and bear arms and say that it shall not be infringed. Shall not be infringed. They didn't say that to protect hunters and sportsmen. I mean, that's part of it, but it was about having a well-armed populace to fight back against a government that would be slouching towards tyranny, and to allow states to be armed against an over-aggressive federal government, to allow individuals to protect their hearth and home, their families, their property. And I think that the need to do all of those things is more acute now than at any point, certainly in my lifetime, as you see a lawless federal administration in the president, again, denying our national sovereignty, trading away our national sovereignty at the southern border, refusing to enforce the laws, and then passing administrative rules that are unconstitutional to try to control us and deprive us of our freedoms. Again, when I talk about scary times, that's really where the rubber hits the road.
Do you think Missouri will ever stand up a state level militia?
Yeah, we have done that in the past. We've had a state level militia. The traditional sense of the National Guard was the militia, and I think United States Supreme Court case law, at the point that the federal government can coerce the National Guard, it's more just augments the federal army. It's not really a militia in the traditional sense of the Second Amendment. Right. And so, I do think that if we continue down this path of a lawless federal executive branch, and overreaching federal powers that deprive states and individuals of their constitutional rights, I think states will take action. And I think it's important that we restore the constitutional order. And I think President Trump's the man to do it.
So what makes you believe in your heart that Donald Trump is the one? I'm not disagreeing. I want to hear your thoughts on that.
I mean, he as a practical matter, we were better off under President Trump than we have been in the past 4 years. He fixed the southern border, reduced illegal crossings by 90%, implemented Remain in Mexico policies that prevented people from wanting to cross the border and prevented that illegal entry into our country to begin with, built a border wall that he would have finished. We filed the lawsuit to make Biden finish it and won that lawsuit, by the way.
Wait, that was your lawsuit, or is that I don't know anything
Yep.
about that one.
Yeah. We filed the lawsuit to force President Biden to finish building President Trump's border wall, and we won that lawsuit. We were one of the first states to be successful to fight back against Biden's refusal to do his job at the southern border. So huge win. Very proud of that. But again,
that's big, dude.
Yeah. Look, I mean, we are firing on all cylinders here in Missouri at the Attorney General's office and leading on a lot of these issues. But there's a lot of work to do. And we've seen President Trump fix things in the past. We know he can do it. He's a proven fighter and a proven winner. And I think he's just the man for the job. I'm excited to see him prevail in November. But look, it's going to take effort on all of our behalf. And so I got to give a shout out to my friends at voteforamerica.org. I would encourage everyone I talk to, everyone in your audience, go to voteforamerica.org. Make sure you are registered to vote, but you got to go further. You got to get your friends, the folks you go to church with, that you hang out with, that you go to school with, folks that you go to the shooting range with, that you hunt with, and get them to register to vote at voteforamerica.org, but then take them to the polling place in November. Registering to vote doesn't do any good if we don't show up. We need to show up and fight and win on just one day in November. Take your shooting buddy with you. If every gun owner and every hunter in the United States of America shows up to vote, we will win. We can make this too big to rig. Our voices, our votes still matter, and my friends at voteforamerica.org are going to help us do that. Make it too big to rig. Register a friend to vote. Take them with you to the polling place in November.
I have heard, I'm 40 years old, and I've heard this, we need to get out and vote. We need to get out and vote. And I often just kind of put it to the side, that sort of idea. I vote when I can, and I have often that sort of push. And I've never really believed that it was, they always try to make it, this is a make or break election. And I gave a speech on this at Goals that I'll publish later to anybody that's watching. It'll probably be on the channel in the next few days. I said, listen, I don't really care who you vote for. I want you to vote for the Second Amendment.
That's right.
And the Harris Waltz administration will not allow the Second Amendment to stand as it is. They will take every measure to strip us of our rights. And what I've also seen, and what you've hinted at, is I've seen people around Donald Trump starting to understand and reach out to gun owners like myself and some of my cohorts. We've had conversations with people close to Donald Trump, and seeing him understand gun owners, or make any attempt to understand gun owners and the way we believe life should be, is very important. And I don't know, are there, I don't know what hunting culture is like in Missouri. I've only spent time with the guys at CMMG and American Outdoor Brands and a bunch of the gun companies that you have there.
Yeah.
What is that culture like in Missouri?
Yeah, robust and healthy, man.
Great, good.
In Missouri, we love our guns, man. I think about like Black Rain Ordnance down in Nevada, Missouri, make some great AR-15s. I got some friends down there. I think the folks at Fiocchi, at Starline Brass in Sedalia. I think about Lake City Ammo Plant, which, by the way, Letitia James tried to get Joe Biden to shut down Lake City Ammo Plant outside of Kansas City. We fought back and put a stop to that. They were trying to manipulate the marketplace to drive up the cost of ammo so that folks like you and me couldn't afford ammo anymore. I'm not going to let that happen. So I think about the tradition and the culture in Missouri, and it's not only hunting and sportsmen, but it's also just a love of freedom and a love of firearms. And so, we have Article 1, Section 23 of the Missouri Constitution, where we've codified one of the most robust protections of our right to keep and bear arms, ammunition, and accessories, and limiting local authorities to infringe upon those rights. I commend it to everyone. Every state should enact that level of constitutional protection in their state constitutions.
Is the word accessories in that?
It is. Yep.
Wow. Holy
Yep.
shit, that's amazing.
When it creates an obligation on the behalf of the state to defend against any encroachments, it creates an affirmative duty for the state to defend any encroachments on our right to keep and bear arms, firearms, ammunition, and accessories. So I view it as not only my moral obligation, but my legal obligation under a mandate of the state constitution as well.
Wow. That's honestly, again, just refreshing. Side note, the first AR, you can't see it, it's up over there, but the first AR I ever assembled was a Black Rain Ordnance receiver set.
They make some good ones, man. Love them.
Dude. Yeah, you know, the people that I've met in Missouri that are gun owners are amazing people. And I think they've got somebody on their side that is, you're doing great work, man. You know, you kind of this case about the wall. You didn't mention that anywhere, but you're punching these people in the face as much as you possibly can. You said you've got 50 pending lawsuits, roughly.
Yeah, man, I lose count because we have to file them every day. Wake up and figure out how we're going to sue Joe Biden today. But look, again, you've got this situation where the federal bureaucrats think that they get to control our lives and that they somehow have authority that's never been given to them in statute or constitution to enact policy positions without the buy-in from the people's elected representatives. And we got to fight back against that. And that's what those lawsuits represent, is Missouri's fight against that kind of slouch towards tyranny.
So what's the next step? You know, you're suing them, and you know, where are the next big fights going to happen? Obviously you have a bunch going right now. What's the one that you're like, I don't like the way this is going?
Yeah, look, I think the censorship stuff has got to be a number one priority for me over the next 4 years. I think, again, we can't allow a big tech oligarchy that's dominated by radical leftists who hate firearm ownership, hate individual firearm ownership.
They hate freedom in general.
They hate freedom. It's scary to them. We can't be afraid of freedom. You know, it is an irreducible axiomatic principle that rights come with responsibilities. I have the right to keep and bear arms. I have the responsibility to not leave a handgun where my 2-year-old can get to it, right? I mean, it's like we have the right to vote. We have the responsibility to show up to the ballot box. And I'm not afraid of freedom because I believe that the common man is uncommonly perceptive and has the ability to think and act for himself absent government control. And so the left hates that. Certainly the oligarchs in the big tech social media space hate that. So fighting them on those issues and curtailing this censorship that they want to use to forever change our culture is going to be really critical moving forward.
I dream of a day when we get back to the 2012 era and you could post a link to a firearm website and not either be crushed entirely in reach or worse yet banned. Is that your goal? Is your goal to like dismantle these organizations, or are we talking about just preventing them from doing this because they've got these protections? And it's this whole publisher platform argument. We've talked about that on this show several times over. And I want to know what you want to have happen.
I want a functioning marketplace in the big tech space, and I want a free, fair, and open marketplace of ideas that allows the competition of ideas to flourish. And I don't want clandestine individuals turning the dials and driving our viewpoints from public discourse.
I think that's wonderful. I'm gonna turn the wheel a little bit here.
Yeah.
I want to know what are your like top 3 guns that you want to own? Like right now, what's on your mind? You're a very busy guy, so I'm not expecting too crazy of a list of the newest, latest, greatest, but I want to know what kind of stuff you like to shoot.
Man, I'm kind of old school. I'm a wheel gun man. I love revolvers. Yeah, I love any kind of revolver, big caliber, small caliber, single action, double action. I love revolvers. I'm a big Smith & Wesson Model 29 guy. I'm the 44th Attorney General in the more than 200-year history of the state of Missouri. And so kind of partial to the 44 mag Smith & Wesson Model 29, that big frame. And so I've got a couple of those. Love AR-15s, serving in the Army, carrying an M4 into combat in Iraq, very familiar with that platform. And yeah, I've got some AR-15s that I love. man, I never met a gun I didn't like. You know what I mean? Like, it's just I like hunting rifles. I like pistols. I like shotguns. I like military weapons. And so I like to run the whole spectrum. But yeah, if I'm my go-to is definitely a revolver, a wheel gun.
So why 44 mag?
Well, yeah, again, it's just to be in the 44th Attorney General in the history of the state of Missouri.
Yeah. I see the correlation.
Drawn to that. So,
I mean, the Model 29 is fantastic. I've got one. I absolutely love it. 44 Magnum is one of the best cartridges ever made, I would argue. I think so. Yeah.
I like that power. It's just enough kick, get the job done, but not overpowering.
Right. It's not ridiculous. It's easy to control. So if you could have a dream revolver, is there, like, you've got the Model 29, is there like a specific old school one or something fancy that you would like to have?
Man, I would love an original Colt Peacemaker. Like, I've got some reproductions and some modern versions, but I would love an actual, antique Colt Peacemaker. I think that'd be cool. The kind of the 4-click, single action. That's just a classic piece of American history and tradition that I would love to own. I think that'd be cool.
I think that'd be neat. Yeah. Is that a black powder gun originally? I'm sure there are modern takes on it, but
I thought it was I think it was one of the first. I thought it was one of the first cartridge-based pistols. I'm sure there are people in the audience that
somebody will tell me.
There will be a technical expert to correct me if I'm
when
wrong.
it comes to the older guns, I don't know enough about them. I'm not prolific like the new shit. I've got that covered, but when you start talking old school, I'm like, that might be a thing, maybe. I don't know. So you are fighting for the Second Amendment. You're fighting against censorship. You are fighting for closing the southern border. Are you like vying for a new role? What happens if Trump sees this and goes, "Hey, you're coming up here with me"? What happens then?
Yeah, hey man, I'm focused on being the Attorney General for the state of Missouri. Just won that hard-fought primary, trying to win a general election. I still got an election in November to win.
Sure.
And so really focused on that. I want to look, man. I've got 4 small children. I've got an 11-year-old daughter, a 10-year-old son, a 6-year-old son, and a 2-year-old son.
Oh wow, you got a big family. Okay.
Yeah, and I'm blessed and fortunate to have them, and I want them to grow up with the same freedom, safety, and prosperity that I got to enjoy as a kid. And so wherever I can best serve the people of the state of Missouri to protect those interests and those principles is where I'm going to be. And right now that's at the Missouri Attorney General's office.
What a politician's answer. That was so good, dude.
Yeah. I get it. Honestly, though, I never asked to be a politician. I don't want to be a politician.
Right.
I want to be the Attorney General. I got to be a politician to do that. I get it. But at the end of the day, politicians do a lot of talking. This is the show me state. Results matter. And I like getting down to work and getting things done.
I honestly think the best kind of politician are the people that don't want to do it. Honestly, the guy, we talked about this a little bit before we started. The people that are career politicians and have never known something else, like Joe Biden. They are the cancer that we need to just destroy.
Yeah, no,
those
totally agree.
They're eroding this country, and it's kind of scary. So to hear you say, "Hey, I'm not a politician by choice. I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do." Like, holy shit, that is amazing.
Well,
so go ahead.
And I think our generation too. Like it's up to us to pick up this mantle of responsibility and run with it. Like we can't cede ground. We can't give up ground. We've got to move this thing in a better direction, and it's up to us. It's up to voices like yours. I mean, look, the issues you cover, the audience you've assembled, and the things you talk about are so important to protecting that freedom, safety, and prosperity I'm talking about. And so, we're both serving in different roles, but both with the same goal, same ambition in mind. And it's important for folks in our generation to do that. And again, I go back to this election in November. If every gun owner in America registered to vote and shows up to vote and takes somebody with them, our voices will be the loudest in the room. It will be too big to rig. And that's why voteforamerica.org is so important. And I would beseech everybody, register to vote, take somebody with you in November. Let's win this thing. Let's show up and fight on just one day.
And if you live in Missouri, I believe you know who to vote for Attorney General.
Yeah. Hey, look, I love the Show Me State, love my friends and family here in Missouri, and would love support. I would encourage folks to check out, if you're in Missouri, go to baileymo.com, baileymo.com. Check us out on Twitter X at Andrew Bailey Mo. Love support, love people's help as we fight to win in November.
Yeah, I do that every single time, by the way. It's always Twitter. Yeah, it's still Twitter in my head.
Yeah.
Even though it's actually like,
yeah,
it's one of the worst name changes ever. One of the worst.
Or maybe I'm just too dense to get it. Maybe that's
no. I don't know. I sometimes I wonder if I'm like legitimately turning into an old man. I watched Band of Brothers the other day, and now I'm old. Like that's the way it works.
Yeah.
I haven't got my AARP thing yet, but anyway,
I'm with you.
It was one more time that website for learning about you.
Yeah, go to baileymo.com, baileymo.com. Check out the great work we're doing to fight for freedom. Love folks' support if that's something that they would be willing to do. Again, we've got a contested election to win in November here in Missouri, so we can keep fighting for freedom in this state and across the nation. And I intend to lead the nation on these issues moving forward. I think we've demonstrated a willingness and ability to do so. And some of the things we're talking about now, we got to get to work on these issues and fight for them. And we will see the fruits of our labor in the coming years.
I will say this. I know you can't say this. It is, again, very refreshing and wonderful to see somebody kicking the Biden administration square in the balls over and over again. Holy shit, that's amazing. And I am very thankful that you came on the show, man. I really appreciate your time. I know you are incredibly busy. So thank you for being here. And definitely get out to the polls, guys. VoteForAmerica.org. Also, check out our sponsors, Vertex, VERTX.com. Use the code TGC. That same code applies at Camorado.com, CAMORADO. Go get yourself some Sea Smoke. That is the new TGC signature camo color. It's fantastic. Andrew, I really appreciate you being here. Is there anything else you want to say right before we sign off of here?
No, hey, man, really appreciate you. It was great to meet you. Look forward to seeing you at the next Gun Owners of America event. God bless you and your audience.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you. Guys, we will see you very soon.